With free agency in the NFL draft right around the corner, we'll soon find out the new homes for Marvin Harrison Jr., Mike Evans, and other rookie and free agent wide receivers. We will rank the top 10 landing spots on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk. When I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst at NFL Network.
Yeah, and I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com, as well as the latest 2-round mock draft you can check out there as well.
Woo woo. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, yesterday we went through our top 10 landing spots for running backs in terms of rookies and free agents with their fantasy value next year. Now we're going to do wide receivers. This draft class is pretty amazing for wide receivers, especially at the top. And we have some big name free agents out there as well. So we're going to go through our top 10 landing spots where we'd be most excited if they landed for fantasy value next season. I want to start with a team that I think is the clear-cut best landing spot for any top-tier rookie, any top-tier free agent, but specifically for rookie, soon-to-be rookie, Marvin Harrison Jr., and that is the Arizona Cardinals. And I feel like they're being overlooked for how good of a spot that they are. Kyler Murray, people are forgetting what a good quarterback he is, right? He's a good passer, and they have no weapons there. This guy could be a 150-plus target right away. Would you say the Cardinals are your favorite landing spot, or would you go with a different team?
Well, I do, full disclosure, on my latest 2-round mock draft for Sporting News as we go into the Combine. I have 3 quarterbacks starting with the Caleb Williams pick to the Bears, then the Patriots and Commanders, however they break it down, will go Drake May and Jaden Daniels. So that leaves the number 4 overall pick for the Cardinals. Now, it's setting up nicely for them because those teams need quarterbacks. It's not to say that one of those could surprise and jump on Marvin Harrison, who arguably could be the best overall talent in the draft. So when you look at that, yeah, they need a number 1 receiver. Marquise Brown is a free agent. Michael Wilson is their only guy, and he's a second-year player who didn't play all that much as a rookie. He showed some promise, and he can be a good number 2. But, yeah, it's lining up perfectly for Marvin Harrison Jr. because it's a team of need. It's a good system for him where he can stretch the field and be the clear number 1 there immediately. It's going to help their other assets, including Wilson and Trey McBride, get open. This passing game will actually be unlocked a little bit more with what we want to see. And we saw that this type of Browns offense that they have with Drew Petzing, it was a lot about 2 players last year that was related to what Kevin Stefanski did. It was Amari Cooper and David Njoku. Now, we saw half of that equation in Arizona with McBride, but now we have the other half. That guy is going to get a lot of targets, dominate all over the field. So Marvin Harrison Jr., I think it's lining up well. And I'm not going to change this pick, Michelle, until I get any indication that any of those 3 teams would be going in a different direction. They're having Marvin Harrison sit on the silver platter for the Cardinals.
Yeah, I'm really hoping the Patriots don't think about taking him. I don't I don't want that.
Yeah.
I don't want him with the Patriots. It's been a long time since we've seen a good Patriot wide receiver, and then also they don't have a quarterback to throw to him. But yeah, Marquise Brown, I don't even think he's very talented. He got 101 targets in 14 games played, 17-game pace for 123 targets. And that was with playing with Josh Dobbs and a little bit of Kyler Murray. So with Kyler Murray, with Marvin Harrison Jr. being 100 times the player that Marquise Brown, like already coming right into the NFL, I would love this spot for him. Obviously, the next best landing spot for any wide receiver, it's going to be the Chiefs, right? With Patrick Mahomes. I know they have Rashee Rice, who showed he looked awesome as a rookie, but I don't think he's that guy that should be getting 140 plus targets. I don't see him up at that range. So they could still use that kind of possession wide receiver. And I mean, if you land with Patrick Mahomes, we're going to be excited, right? There's still a lot of room, lots of free agent wide receivers there with the Chiefs, or they just cut Marquise Valdes-Scantling. We saw that coming. But would you agree that this is the second best landing spot for any wide receiver?
Yeah, this was a easy decision for me in the mock draft a little bit later. This was the second easiest decision there when there was a wide receiver available that could go after. The real trick is which wide receiver. I think they all line up well with what the Chiefs are looking for. I went eventually with Keon Coleman there of Florida State is pretty good, but I also like AD Adonai Mitchell there out of Texas. He fits what they're doing. If they want a little bit more complete receiver, I would say Coleman, Mitchell are more the big play threats that are kind of rounding out into being more consistent targets. Then you look at a Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU. He's got size as well. All these guys are pretty big. They can stretch the field. And I can go one more here in Troy Franklin out of Oregon. So there's a lot of really good options here right where the Chiefs are picking in the draft. So I think that's where they're going to go. We just heard about them sitting on the franchise tag for Jerry Sneed. They got to lock up Chris Jones. If they sign a receiver, we just talked about him, I think it would be Marquise Brown because they would get him on a cheap there and put him in that MBS role immediately. But that definitely opens up a spot for a starter on the outside. We know Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore. These are not going to be options with Rashee Rice. So when you look at it, it lines up really well for that classic number one outside receiver with some size, some field stretching ability. And we're going to definitely circle that player to play well off Travis Kelce and Rice next season.
Yeah, any guy that lands there. I know a lot of people would love to see Brandon Ayuk get traded there. I don't really see that happening because they would have to spend at least the first round pick and then probably plus more and then pay him. Like they could have just done that for Tyreek Hill. They could have just paid Tyreek Hill a couple years ago. So I don't know if that happens, but obviously if Ayuk were to go there, that would be huge. And then to finish out the top three, I think it was really hard to pick my third favorite landing spot, but I think I'm going to go with the Jaguars. Because Calvin Ridley is a free agent. I mean, Calvin Ridley had 136 targets last year. It only ended up being 1,016 yards. And it's not his yards per reception. Fantastic. 13.4. You'll take that for 136 targets. But he had a pitiful 56% catch rate. They just didn't have the connection. Trevor Lawrence and Calvin Ridley couldn't get it going. I know there were specific games where Ridley went off, but it was not consistent at all. So Ridley is a free agent. We'll see if they bring him back. But again, they didn't have the connection, so don't see why you would. Zay Jones is also a free agent. That leaves just Christian Kirk, who's coming off a pretty serious injury, but I think he'll be fine for next year. They have to bring in someone, and this guy is going to have a chance to be the number one guy with Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, so far his key target's been Christian Kirk, no doubt about it. I mean, they've clicked right away all over the field here the last couple years. You also have Evan Engram at tight end. He's really had a good connection with, and these guys have been key. Now, both of these guys are inside receivers. Kirk lines up mostly in the slot, and Engram is a tight end that can be moved a little bit off the line to produce. Now, they need a classic outside guy. I think Calvin Ridley, if you go back to his best season with the Falcons, they used him a lot in the slot. The problem is they've got someone there with Kirk, and then they tried him at a different position last year. I think they need some pressure off him, right? He's not the guy that's going to just single-handedly beat coverage. And if you go back to what he did in Atlanta, he had Julio Jones near the end, but still productive at that time. So Ridley to me is a complimentary number two receiver. I think they need to look more at a number one. They do have to consider some needs on the defensive line and offensive line here, so that could prohibit them, the Jaguars, from going after receiver. But there are a lot of good options for them. Mentioned some of those same players that the Chiefs would be looking at. I don't know how high the Jaguars are going to consider wide receiver, but there's some depth later in the draft. I like Xavier Worthy there. That could be a good pick out of Texas for them. If they want a little bit of size there, I think they can look at Franklin as well if they want to consider him. So there are a lot of really good targets there. I think they need to go after a tall, big receiver on the outside. So Ridley, I think you'd go either way. Keep in mind he's nearing 30 years old and he's had the missed time. So we'll see how it plays out. I think you could go either way with Ridley. If he returns there, then he has a little bit more promise though they would have to find a replacement for Jones because that seemed to be very key, right? Jones had to be on the field here to help Ridley get open and play in the right position.
Yeah, I agree with you that I think Xavier Worthy later in the draft, second, third round, would be a great fit for the Jaguars to just fill that big speedster type role that Zay Jones is playing, and it would be a cheap way to do it. I will say if they want to get that top guy, they want to use that first rounder. They're in a tough spot at 17th overall. Like those top three guys are
Yeah.
going to be gone, and then I think it's too early to go to reach for another guy. But maybe that's the perfect team that has the right draft pick to then trade for Brandon Ayuk, because I do think the 49ers are going to be looking for that middle of the first round type pick. And I do think Ayuk with Trevor Lawrence would be a beaut. Also, Michael Pittman Jr. I'd love here, but it does seem like the Colts are going to tag him, and then it's in division, so I don't think they would trade him there.
Yeah, I mean, all good points there. And I think there's one good landing spot for Calvin Ridley. In fact, some of those players on that team have been lobbying him to join. They will make our cut for the next group of neediest wide receivers in our next segment. What would you do if you had an extra hour in your day? Well, you could go for a run. You could take a nap. You could maybe do a few more errands around the house or just to relax, read a book. Well, a lot of us spend our lives wishing that we had more time to do the things that we needed to kind of help and settle ourselves. The question is, time for what? If we had all the time in the world, what would you do to use it? Well, the best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is knowing what's important to you and making a priority. And that's therapy. I mean, we can all benefit from therapy. I go to therapy to really find my way when I get lost. And therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it and have the time to do that. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, you should give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. This episode, again, brought to you by BetterHelp. We really know that this is important to everyone's life, and we want to stress that it's really important to go seek out help if you need it or just need to talk to somebody. They're there for you at BetterHelp. So just fill out that questionnaire, get paired with a therapist. Again, you can change with no additional charge at any time, so you make sure you have the right fit. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. And we thank them for sponsoring Locked On Fantasy Football. All right, Michelle, it is time to continue the show here and break down more needy wide receiver teams. And I did hint at a team that Calvin Ridley could go to and be effective. It is the New York Jets. They have Garrett Wilson. Look, all these guys that Aaron Rodgers lobbied to bring there, Alan Lazard, Randall Cobb, stop this. We need to get legitimate receivers. They were throwing a curveball when Corey Davis decided to retire, so you didn't have that option. And really, it was the Garrett Wilson show and a lot of Breece Hall. We know that in the passing game and not much else for the Jets. So, Michelle, where do you think the Jets are going to go here? And let's hope they do not listen to Aaron Rodgers again to be their GM.
I know. So Tyler Conklin was their third target. That that can't happen again. And it's really hard to decipher last year what was the issues with the personnel, or was it just all quarterback issues, right? So with Aaron Rodgers, would Alan Lazard played better? Because we saw Lazard have a fine year with the Packers with Aaron Rodgers, maybe, but I still think they need to add a really solid wide receiver too. I love the Calvin Ridley idea of going here, right? Garrett Wilson and Calvin Ridley, I think, would be a really nice pairing. You don't have to pay Ridley too much just because it's not like he blew up last year and he's getting older. So you can have a smaller contract, a few years there. And Garrett, I think instantly you fix that, because if it goes Garrett Wilson, Calvin Ridley, then Breece Hall, maybe you upgrade at tight end or even keep Tyler Conklin. And then you have Alan Lazard as like your third option. You still have Xavier Gibson, who showed some flashes as a rookie. Like all of a sudden, just adding that one wide receiver who's competent and much greater talent than these other guys, it immediately makes your pass catchers look so much better.
Yeah, we told you all that news about Marcus Valdes-Scantling being cut. That was my first thought. Please, Aaron Rodgers,
No,
don't
no.
go get him to the Jets. He's going to recruit him somehow. I mean, maybe his buddy on the Chiefs, Mecole Hardman, told him don't go to the Jets. It wasn't very good, so maybe they'll keep him out of New York. But maybe this is a landing spot for Hollywood Brown as well because he can stretch the field again. He's better as a complimentary number 2. I don't know if they can convince Mike Evans to come there. That would be very great, of course, to pair him up with Aaron Rodgers this late in his career, and maybe he could be chasing another ring. I don't know, but the Bucs also just won a playoff game, so interesting considerations there for Mike Evans in free agency. I think Michael Pittman will probably be franchise tag, so he won't be an option here for the Jets. So maybe go to the draft. Another way they could upgrade it. You talked about Tyler Conklin. They like throwing to the tight end. Maybe they look at Brock Bowers or Jatavion Sanders in the draft and really upgrade the receiving core in that way. So that's also something we're going to watch out for. If they go in that direction a little bit more, and then they're happy with Wilson, Hall, the tight end being the key targets. I mean, there's a lot of teams like that. Detroit Lions, right, that are okay with a wide receiver, running back, and tight end kind of being the key targets and going forward. So we want to see where that target volume goes, essentially, away from Wilson and Hall. And whoever that player is, veteran or rookie, wide receiver or tight end, we're definitely going to be interested in fantasy with Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, so I think the Jets are clearly up there in the top tier, like best landing spot. And then this next group of teams, they're all kind of the same. The Lions, the Bills, and the Cowboys. They all have one fantastic elite wide receiver. I'm still going to put Stephon Diggs into that category, right? But then behind those guys, they really don't have anybody else, at least at wide receiver, right? The Lions have Sam Laporta and Jahmyr Gibbs. Cool. The Bills have Dalton Kincaid and James Cook. Great. Cowboys have Jake Ferguson, and I guess not much else if you want to still count Brandon Cooks outside of CeeDee Lamb. So there is a chance for any guy to go here to be the second option on their team, at least at wide receiver, with a really, really good offense and with a good quarterback. So which of these landing spots would you be most excited about? Lions, Bills, or Cowboys?
I think it has to be the Bills only
Yeah.
because there's that opening for the clear number 2. Now, actually, all these teams need a similar receiver. They need kind of that number 2 outside guy because CeeDee Lamb lines up a ton in the slot. We know Amon-Ra St. Brown is a dedicated slot receiver. And with the Bills, they have Khalil Shakir and Dalton Kincaid that they can work in the middle of the field. So all these teams are looking for that ideal complementary number 2 who can line up on the outside. So some of these same players, I had the Bills looking at an option here in Brian Thomas Jr. I think he'd be a good fit. I mentioned Coleman and Mitchell and Franklin. Those all would come into play for this team as well in the draft. I think the Cowboys, again, they would look at any of these players. And I think maybe getting a little bit more speed, you could look for a small receiver there in Roman Wilson from Michigan. So I think they can all explore these same options that I did mention there in the late first round, early second round. Another guy that's pretty versatile as a number 2 that has been really rising up draft boards is Ladd McConkey out of Georgia. So they can line up everywhere. He's pretty technically sound. He can stretch the field at times as well. So I think he would be a good fit with any one of these teams. So a lot of things to consider here. I don't think, again, Evans or Pittman or now franchise tag T. Higgins is an option. We'll see about Brown here. I don't know if he fits because he doesn't have the size on the outside. So really, other than that, I think you're looking at a Kendrick Bourne type that you would put in at number 2. The Patriots not re-signing him. That would be a lot less exciting in either of those situations.
Yeah, I was thinking Marquise Brown could be a really nice fit for the Bills.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of an upgrade he is over Gabe Davis, but he's
Yeah.
he's shiftier, he's faster, small. Yeah, it's not like someone you'd get super excited for, but this would be a nice landing spot for him because he wouldn't have like attention on him at all, right? Diggs and Kincaid are going to take that, or even if he's with the Lions, they have so many other options that they're going to take all the pressure off of him. I'm confused about the Cowboys one because I don't know if it's a great landing spot. They threw so much this past year. Didn't get to run a lot because of Tony Pollard didn't live up to expectations. We'll see who they bring in. Maybe they run more, but I just think CeeDee Lamb is just going to keep being a beast. So I'm going to put him at the bottom of this category and then go Bills, Lions, and the Cowboys. Now, there are a handful of teams that have great opportunity for volume, right? Like it's a landing spot where they could get a lot of volume, but the situation is a little gross. You don't know how excited you can really get for these landing spots, but we're going to talk through those, rank them, and finish out our top 10 in our next segment. This episode is also sponsored by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and more. My favorite player prop for tonight's slate of NBA games is the Suns' Devin Booker to have over 37.5 combined points, assists, and rebounds against the Houston Rockets. Last week, LeBron James sat out on me after picking him as my favorite prop. But for the guys who have played, I am 3-0 on my picks so far. So let's see how long the streak can last. Again, that's Devin Booker, over 37.5 combined points, assists, and rebounds tonight. To get in on the action, just sign up at FanDuel.com/lockedon and get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, let's finish out this top 10 landing spots. I know my next favorite spot, but there's a lot of teams that are wide receiver needy, right? We got the Panthers, the Titans, the Falcons, the Chargers, the Browns, the Ravens, the Colts, if they don't tag Michael Pittman Jr. Even the Saints, like they have Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, but they could still use some depth. The Broncos, if they move on from Jerry Jeudy and Tim Patrick. So lots of teams need wide receivers. Even the Eagles, Dolphins, and Bengals could use a third guy. So who would you say is your next favorite spot? I'll have you go first, and then I'll give you my number 8 spot.
Well, I think if the Chargers would cut Mike Williams, I'm going to say it's them. But right now, I know it sounds weird, but I would say the Panthers because I don't think Adam Thielen's going to hold up. I also don't think they're going to bring back DJ Chark as a free agent. I think they'll probably give up on Terrace Marshall here. I know they could do some things with Jonathan Mingo, but I think it's still wide open, and I think this Panthers offense is going to be a lot better with Dave Canales there. He's just really fixed quarterbacks and really made wide receivers very relevant in his last 2 spots. So I do like the Panthers quite a bit. I have questions about the quarterback, but I think that's fair with the Titans. You would have that question as well, and the Falcons, right? So I think they're equal across the board. If you felt better about the quarterbacks, you would say maybe putting the Colts and Chargers in that category. So right now, the Panthers taking A.D. Mitchell out of Texas, someone to consider as a potential number 1 on the outside for them. And the Titans taking Xavier Legette out of South Carolina. And then McConkey, who I mentioned, I have going to the Falcons, staying in state. And we mentioned Xavier Worthy. I think the Colts actually sneakily need a field stretcher. If they're not happy with Alec Pierce, I think they need to get someone who's going to go track those balls downfield. So Worthy could definitely do that here for Richardson. So really, Michelle, I'd say this is a tough question to answer because we still need to see how things break down. But I would say those teams that have the struggling, sputtering offenses, the Panthers and Titans, top this list.
Yeah, my number 8 were the Carolina Panthers. It's hard because Bryce Young didn't look very good, right? But he has a new head coach in Dave Canales. He has a new OC in Brad Idzik. I don't know how to say his last name. But both coming from the Buccaneers. The new OC was the wide receiver coach for the Buccaneers. We'll see what they can do here to help out Bryce Young. But they in terms of a wide receiver landing here, you brought up Adam Thielen. He's 100 years old. Mingo was fine as a rookie, didn't shine. DJ Chark's a free agent. They don't have a tight end, like literally. They don't have a pass catching running back. So the opportunity here is massive, absolutely massive. It just comes down to, can they get this offense going? Can Bryce Young get going? I do think for Bryce Young's development, they need to bring in a true wide receiver one guy that we all expect Mike Evans just to go back to the Buccaneers, but if he's going to leave for any team, maybe his old coaches can get him to come there if they pay him up, and maybe they feel good about Mike Evans trying to help develop Bryce Young. That could be an interesting spot. But even if they do bring in Mike Evans and pay him, I think they need to use multiple draft picks. It doesn't mean it has to be their first one at 33, but I do think they should use that on a wide receiver. But they should do what the Packers did. Take like 3 wide receivers in this class and just hope 1 or 2 of them hit. And they really need to help out Bryce Young here with his development. So I think that's a really nice landing spot. You brought up the Chargers. They are my number 9. So I do expect them to cut Mike Williams unless they figure out a way to change his, lower his contract. But they can save $20 million if they cut Mike Williams. they're in a pretty bad financial system. They're already paying Keenan Allen a ton of money. He's the top cap hit this year among all wide receivers. He's turning 32 years old. Quentin Johnson was incredibly bad. I will say the one thing that makes me nervous about this landing spot is Greg Roman being the OC. So I'm worried they're going to be super run heavy. I don't love that. But at the same time, if you get the chance to be the number 2 for Justin Herbert, that's a pretty nice situation, right? And they have the number 5 overall pick. So this is a perfect spot for Malik Neighbors, for Rome Odunze. And I do think this is still a very solid landing spot.
Yeah, and the other pivot again we have to consider here with Gerald Everett being a free agent is Brock Bowers. They could bring him in if they want this hard nosed type of offense, and Greg Roman has really trusted Mark Andrews in that role previously in his stop in Baltimore. So I think these other teams kind of are looking for the complementary receivers, right? The Browns, Ravens. I think you put them in that boat. The Saints for sure with what they're considering behind now. I would say Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. Michael Thomas is a free agent. So, and then Denver, we'll see what they do. I mean, that's just an absolute mess that there's going to be a lot of uncertainty. Now, 3 sneaky teams I wanted to bring up here that need that like third target, right? And the third target of these teams is a lot more appealing than the number 2 target on a lot of teams because they're not throwing the ball as much or having as much offensive success. So I look at the Eagles. They could really benefit from a guy that isn't Quez Watkins to really support Devonta Smith and AJ Brown. We haven't seen enough of Dallas Goedert. He's been inconsistent to do that at tight end. Maybe they're happy with that, but I think the Eagles could really upgrade and maybe a guy that can play the outside because Smith can play in the slot. Then you look at the Dolphins. They have essentially 2 slot receivers they can move around at Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. So I have them potentially going after more speed. And Roman Wilson, they're out of Michigan. He's one of the faster players. So you add a little bit more speed, add that third target. That will really help those guys get open. And the Bengals, they're going to look like they're going to keep T. Higgins. There's a chance they tag and trade him, but Tyler Boyd is not coming back. So they have an opportunity for a slot receiver. Again, another potential rumored landing spot here for Brock Bowers.
Yeah, I think these would be like, yeah, Brock Bauer is a great landing spot for either the Dolphins or Bengals. I think that's kind of where I'm looking more with those teams in terms of good landing spots would be tight end position instead of wide receiver. Because I think if a wide receiver lands in these spots, I think it's great for the teams. Like I think that's what the teams need to do. They need to add a good wide receiver 3. But in terms of position for fantasy value, especially like it would be like Jackson Smith-Njigba going to the Seahawks. You're kind of just waiting for him to get a bigger opportunity, right? Because those 2 guys are just going to steal it. So the opportunity to be a top 12 guy just isn't really there when you're stuck on these offenses unless there's an injury or until you wait a couple of years. I'll give you one more, my number 10 landing spot in terms of fantasy value. It's the Titans. You brought them up quickly. Nerve-wracking because it's Will Levis, right? And he did support some really good fantasy days for DeAndre Hopkins, some really bad ones as well. We'll see his development. But they also could cut Hopkins and save $16 million. I don't know if Hopkins did enough to say, yeah, we're willing to eat all this money. We could save $16 million. We'll see. But he's turning 32 years old still. But even if Hopkins is there, they still need to find other playmakers. I mean, Treylon Burks is just, he can't stay healthy. And when he's on the field, it's not like he really is doing anything. They're in a perfect spot in the draft at number 7 to either get the Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze. And I would say with Rome Odunze, he's such a big threat that it goes really nice with Will Levis's huge arm. That could be a huge rookie season for him with just not even maybe a ton of targets if Hopkins is there, like probably not the 130 plus targets, but if he got that 110 and a lot of deep throws, that could be a really nice rookie season for him.
Yeah, the Titans need to weigh some other needs here, especially offensive tackle. They went out and got Pete or Skoronski to play guard last year, but they're really hurting at the tackles. I mean, they had to put an Andre Dillard, who was an Eagles bust, their left tackle last season. And yeah, they're going to look for a tackle, I think, first, but wide receiver is not going to be far behind in terms of an offensive need. I talked about Xavier Worthy. I talked about Xavier Legette as well. And the Titans have actually looked at him quite a bit as being a field stretcher type. They want to be able to throw the ball downfield. I mean, you have Brian Callahan taking over. So we already have a pretty good pass catching back there in Tyjae Spears. And maybe you can unlock Chigakonkwo more as an athletic tight end. But you're right. Terrell Burks is not reliable. Hopkins could easily be cut, and Hopkins is getting older as well. So we're not sure how much longer he can hold up here. So you need to take advantage. Will Levis has a big arm. You need someone who can help him stretch the field, open up this offense a little bit more as they go in the opposite direction of the Chargers, right? Maybe passing a little bit more. It's not going to be the same old pound the ball Titans. I mean, we know what Callahan did with the Bengals. They were very pass heavy in going in that direction. So I do like the Titans. Again, I wish I could trust Will Levis a little bit more to feel great about the wide receiver options here. But again, if you pair him with the right guy and they develop chemistry on the same page as a second-year QB and a rookie wide receiver, then you're in business here, because we did see the flashes of the big arms with Hopkins for sure last season.
Yeah, so that's our top 10 landing spots for wide receivers. It's only going to be another 2 months before we know all of these landing spots. Super excited. Love to know that, and just try, and then we'll dig into what we foresee their 2024 season to look like. But that is it for today's show. Thank you to you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Every day, Vinny and I will be back tomorrow discussing more fantasy football greatness. Don't miss it. Bye, y'all.
See you.